Hello artists! Today I just wanted to take you through the steps I used to create this watercolour moon. So this really is an exercise in patience because it's about adding layer and layer of watercolour until you get the right look. The first step is to draw the circle and paint in the circle with clear water. So we're using the wet on wet technique here so that we can get that sort of soft, dreamy quality that you get when you're looking at the moon. So my first layer of colour was to put down this light grey, and you can see I've got these 3 different tones of grey at the top. I also add some black as well. One of the problems I found with this paper was because it was in a book, I wasn't able to prepare it the same way that you normally would prepare a watercolour paper. So what I'm getting is these little valleys and bubbles in the paper as I'm wetting it. And so to counter that, what I'm doing is drying my paintbrush off periodically and just soaking back up some of the paint that's in those valleys. So I'm not actually getting pools of watercolour in my painting. So I'm just layering with the different tones, kind of going back and forth between the mid-tone and the light tone at the moment. And I'm actually referencing a picture of the moon, which you can't see on screen. I just wanted to make sure I was getting the dark spots in the right places. And I think it depends on which hemisphere you're in and what time of year it is as to what the moon will actually look like to you. As you can see, I've sped this up because the whole project did take me about an hour and 15 minutes. So just to make it a bit quicker for you, I've sped it up. So I'm just going to leave it going here for a minute so you can see how I added the different layers. So this part here you can see when I'm adding the darker colour, some of the edges felt a little bit too harsh to me, so I added a little bit more water just to allow it to have that softness of the rest of the wet on wet technique. So what I started doing here was I tried to lift some of the watercolour off the page to give it a bit of lightness around those areas that you see the white stripy crater type of look on the moon. It didn't really work as well as I wanted it to on these light parts of the moon, but I do come back a bit later and add a little bit of acrylic white paint to that. I also added a few dots of the white watercolour over top of some of the dark areas just to give it a little bit of a character. Okay, so here you see just a bit more layering. I'm putting the dark stuff down. I'm kind of fuzzing it out a little bit. And then coming back, taking a little bit off with my paintbrush, and then coming back and putting some more dark bits down. So it's just this play between layering some paint, taking a little bit off, layering again. The depth of this painting really relies on the constant layering. So there's not really any shortcuts to this. You can't just sort of get it right the first layer and then you've got a picture of a moon. It really depends on a lot of layering underneath that final coat of paint. So when it comes to filling in the background, I actually had to do 2 layers of this just to make it a really nice flat black. And see how I'm twisting the book all around? I'm trying to get nice sharp edges against the moon. That's going to make it look a little bit like it pops out of the page. So here what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing a little bit of white, and you can see I'm trying to make the paintbrush a little bit pointy by scraping it against my palette there, and I'm adding in these little lines which define the craters of the moon. I ended up having to do this with acrylic because with the wet on wet technique, putting the white watercolor on there, it was just blending straight into everything. So I did wait for this to dry a little bit before I added the white acrylic, because even in an acrylic it will blend into like a really wet background. So a lot of students ask me how I get really fine lines when I'm painting, and the secret to that is by using a lot of brush control, really light touching the brush against the page. So you can see here what I'm doing now is I'm just splattering a little bit of this white straight over the moon, and it kind of gives it just a bit of a character. It gives it a few little more white spots. It's quite like a quick, easy way to do it. And then I've gone and I've put a few extra white spots in where the photograph that I'm looking at shows me it needs white spots. A little bit of shadow just around this crater, a nice blended shadow, just to give it some depth. And then one final coat over the black to make it really flat. And this is the final image.